A narrator begins to recount events from a few years ago as a serene baby sleeps peacefully. The story opens at the grand apricot ducal estate. On the day Olivia was born, well-wishers eagerly congratulated Lord Gerald and Lady Rihanna on their adorable little girl. Lady Rihanna warmly thanked everyone, promising to raise her daughter into a fine young lady. Meanwhile, Lord Gerald observed the joyous occasion with a notably stoic and unreadable expression. Beaming with pride, Rihanna happily called out to her husband. She affectionately noted that little Olivia shared his hair color and expressed hope that the baby would grow up to be just as bright as him. The newborn baby simply stared back with wide, innocent eyes. Staring blankly at his wife, Gerald offered only a silent, questioning glance. Unbothered by the cold reception, the baby smiled brightly and cooed. Suddenly, Gerald recoiled slightly, covering his mouth as if struck by a disturbing realization. Without a single word, he immediately turned his back on his wife and their newborn child. Coldly excusing himself to return to his research, he told the staff to call him only if they needed something. Left sitting alone in the bed, a stunned Rihanna could only gasp in utter confusion. 100 days later, priests at the church regretfully informed the family that Lady Olivia possessed almost no magical power. Devastated by the crushing news, Rihanna desperately begged them to check the results again. The solemn priests merely shook their heads, confirming the tragic and undeniable truth. Clutching little Olivia tightly to her chest, Rihanna stared upward in absolute despair. Silent tears streamed down her face as she cradled her powerless child in the empty church. While the oblivious baby babbled happily, Rihanna tearfully apologized, blaming herself for Olivia's lack of magic. As time flowed on, a now 5-year-old Olivia ran excitedly toward her mother. Bearing her father's silver hair and mother's icy blue eyes, little Olivia Apricot joyfully showed off some pretty flowers she found. Sweetly thanking the gardener for taking such good care of the plants, Olivia earned his warm praise for her kindness. She then delightfully offered a flower to the gushing maids, who thanked the young lady profusely. As the maids praised Olivia's remarkably pure heart, Rihanna set her teacup down with a notably stern expression. Interrupting the cheerful moment, her mother called her name sharply. Rihanna strictly reminded Olivia to carry herself properly, as she was the heir to the apricot ducal house and could not act unbecomingly. Dusting off Olivia's dirty dress, Rihanna urged her to be mindful of her actions, a command the young girl cheerfully accepted. Suddenly, Olivia gasped in surprise as she spotted someone approaching the garden. Recognizing the newcomer, she excitedly called out to her father. Running eagerly up to Gerald, Olivia offered him the beautiful flowers and begged him to take a look. Beaming brightly, she enthusiastically suggested placing the blossoms in his room. She happily imagined how nice the flowers would make his entire workspace smell. Instead of accepting the sweet gift, Gerald merely clicked his tongue in clear, undisguised annoyance. Brushing past his young daughter without a single word, he continued walking away, leaving her behind. Left standing alone with the flowers in her small hands, a stunned Olivia could only let out a quiet gasp. Disheartened, she murmured that her father didn't seem to like flowers very much. Forcing a brave smile, she desperately tried to hide her crushing disappointment. Watching the heartbreaking scene unfold, Rihanna gently and sadly called out to her daughter. Olivia turned around, looking up at her mother with a wide, innocent expression. Rihanna's face contorted with quiet grief as she realized Gerald truly didn't care about a child born with weak magical power. Glaring at her husband's retreating, she bitterly noted that he had completely ignored their daughter without saying a single word. Tugging gently on Rihanna's dress, Olivia earnestly asked what kind of things her father actually liked. Showing incredible resilience, the little girl declared she wanted to make him happy next time. Startled by her daughter's pure and forgiving nature, Rihanna looked down in absolute awe. Pulling Olivia into a fierce hug, Rihanna silently vowed that she would have to raise the girl properly all by herself. From that moment on, intense academic tutors were assigned to Olivia, even though she was still quite young. The strict training aimed to forge her into a refined young lady who would never bring shame to the family in public. Under her mother's affectionate but strict guidance, Olivia learned flawless etiquette and gained vast knowledge. No matter how grueling the lessons became, Olivia cheerfully obeyed and never once lost her radiant smile. At a massive formal dining table, young Olivia sits isolated in the middle while her parents eat silently at the extreme opposite ends. Rihanna stares down at her plate with a somber, deeply troubled expression on her face. Meanwhile, Gerald consumes his meal with his eyes closed, projecting an aura of cold indifference. On the day of her 6th birthday party, Olivia suddenly looks up in surprise. 3 maids stand hesitantly before the young girl, clutching their aprons with incredibly nervous and apologetic expressions. Sweating nervously, one of the maids stammers out a terrible apology to the young heir. She informs a stunned Olivia that her father was summoned to the royal palace and had already left early that morning. Bowing her head to hide her crushing disappointment, Olivia quietly accepts the news about her father's sudden absence. Confirming he won't make it to the party, the frantic maid hastily presents a wrapped gift to the saddened girl. Cradling the large box, Olivia listens as the maid explains that her father specifically asked them to deliver the present. The maids desperately try to cheer her up, insisting the party will be wonderful and that her father had been looking forward to it. Forcing a brave, bright smile, Olivia cheerfully agrees with their comforting words. Beaming enthusiastically, she declares her firm intention to thank her father personally the moment he returns to the estate. Later that evening, Olivia sits entirely alone at the center of the massive banquet table while surrounded by silent, serving maids. Despite maintaining a polite smile throughout the solitary meal, the harsh reality ultimately sets in. Just as she secretly feared, her father couldn't make it to the celebration at all. While washing dishes in the kitchen, the concerned maids whisper among themselves, hoping that Lady Olivia is all right. They note how bravely she acted during the party, recalling that his lordship had completely missed her birthday the previous year as well. When one maid asks about the young lady's whereabouts, another replies that she is currently resting in her room. Contrary to their hopeful wishes, Olivia lies face down on her large bed, weeping quietly into her arms. Muffled sniffles and tragic hiccups echo from behind the heavy, ornate doors of her bedroom. Standing silently in the hallway, Rihanna presses her hand against the door and listens helplessly to her daughter's heartbreaking sobs. With a deeply pained expression, the devastated mother softly murmurs her daughter's name. Staring out the window, Rihanna bitterly reflects that even a sudden royal summons shouldn't excuse a father missing his daughter's birthday 2 years in a row. Clenching her jaw as the day ends, she mentally curses Gerald for not offering even a single comforting word to their dear child. Back in her darkened room, a tear-stained Olivia slowly stirs awake from her exhausting crying session. Sitting up in the gloom, she realizes she fell asleep and that her special day is already over. Resolving to shake off her sorrow, she firmly slaps her own cheeks to snap out of her depressive state. Forcing a determined pout, she reminds herself not to stay sad because her father is busy being the most powerful mage in the entire country. Deciding she needs to cheer up immediately, she slips out of bed to go fetch herself some water. Suddenly, she freezes in the hallway upon overhearing a shocking, hushed conversation from the staff. Peeking around the corner, her eyes widen in sheer horror as she hears the maids gossiping about her utter lack of magical power. The devastating realization sets in as the maids connect her weakness to the Duke's coldness and his frequent, suspiciously long absences from the estate. Trembling in the shadows, Olivia listens to agonizing rumors that her father built a separate house and might even have another child. She visualizes her father's freezing glare, realizing her crushing inadequacy even though she is his own flesh and blood. Sinking into absolute despair, she internally repeats that her father's cruel rejection is entirely her own fault. Refusing to accept this tragic fate, she forcefully rejects the terrible rumors echoing in her mind. With fresh tears pooling in her eyes, she desperately rationalizes that she simply needs to work harder to unlock her power so her father will acknowledge her. Clenching her small fists in fierce determination, she tearfully screams in her mind that relentless hard work will fix everything. A few days later, Rihanna stands anxiously by the window, staring out into the bleak distance. The horrific rumors have reached the mother as well, leaving her to dread the terrible possibility of her husband hiding a secret child. Pressing her hand against the glass, she fiercely affirms that Olivia is the rightful heir regardless of her magical weakness. Turning away from the light, Rihanna grips the curtains in pure terror, utterly paralyzed by the fear of discovering the truth. Suddenly, Olivia storms into the room and demands more tutors, desperately promising to master history, etiquette, and magic. True to her desperate vow, the young girl violently threw herself into her intense academic studies. Sitting rigidly at her desk, she brutally commands herself to stop grinning like an idiot. Suppressing her natural childhood joy, she violently forces herself to hold back her tears at all costs. Looking over her shoulder with empty eyes, she solidifies her dark vow to never let anyone see her true emotions ever again. Approaching her mother with a chillingly composed and lifeless expression, Olivia calls out to her in a flat tone. Completely devoid of her former warmth, she calmly asks for assistance regarding a difficult concept in her magic lessons. A young girl earnestly hopes her companion could teach her something. The recipient of the request, a woman wearing a crisp collared dress with a dark ribbon, stares ahead in silence. The woman coldly dismisses the request, telling the child to ask her tutor for help instead. With a dismissive click of her heels, the long-haired woman turns and walks away through the grand doorway. Left alone, little Olivia apologizes, internalizing the rejection and blaming herself for the situation. Defeated and somber, she quietly wishes the departing figure a good night. Olivia forces a bright, empty smile while clutching her book to her chest. Clinging to her book with a tight squeeze, she struggles to maintain a cheerful facade as a heavy realization sets in. Sitting isolated at a massive dining table, she accepts the painful truth that she is not loved by her father or her mother. Aware that she always ends up making a noise, she fiercely resolves that today will be different. She carefully reaches out to grasp the elegant handle of her teacup. As she delicately lifts the porcelain cup, it makes a soft clinking sound against the saucer. Olivia instantly freezes, her eyes widening in embarrassed panic at the slight noise. She nervously glances up from the table, gauging the reaction of the older woman standing beside her. The older woman stares down at her, coldly remarking that she has finally learned her lesson. Olivia silently absorbs the harsh words, her cheeks flushing slightly. She lowers her gaze entirely, a profound sadness settling over her tiny features. Sitting stiffly with her hands folded in her lap, her face falls completely into dark, lonely shadows. Snapping out of her despair, she rests her chin on her hand and haughtily agrees with the woman. Time flows onward, passing over the grand architecture of the sprawling family estate. Someone calls out to the young lady Olivia as she confidently strolls through the estate gardens. A voice invites her to come admire the beautiful flowers that have bloomed beautifully once again this year. Olivia pauses and glances over her shoulder in silence, taking in the sight of the delicate lilies. Without a second thought, she abruptly dismisses the invitation, stating there is no need. The elderly gardener stops in his tracks, holding a single blossom as he watches her walk away in dismay. Later, a cheerful servant approaches, excitedly announcing that he is serving Milady her favorite cake today. Olivia merely dabs her mouth elegantly with a napkin, flatly declaring that will be all. As the maid stammers out a protest, Olivia shoots her a terrifyingly sharp glare. Declaring that she is already 7 years old after all, Olivia announces her return to her studies. Defeated by her cold demeanor, the maid softly agrees and backs down. Walking down the silent hallway, Olivia firmly reminds herself that she is not a child anymore. Olivia's life had changed forever, marking the year when she truly believed in her new reality. By the age of 7, Olivia's strictly ladylike demeanor had become quite famous. A group of excited women greet her enthusiastically, thanking Lady Olivia for inviting them over. She leads the group forward, demanding to see where the new dresses are right away. A bespectacled dressmaker proudly gestures to a rack of frilly garments, asking for her opinion. The dressmaker holds up a puffy, bow-covered dress, insisting this one would look wonderful on her. Olivia stares at the garment with critical eyes, internally admitting that it is cute. However, she rejects it internally, afraid that the massive bows and ruffles will make her look like a child. Out loud, she glares sharply and asks the dressmaker if she really believes this would suit her. The dressmaker breaks into a nervous sweat, her confident smile crumbling under Olivia's intense stare. Sighing in disappointment, Olivia asks if they have anything more ladylike to offer. Panicking, the flustered dressmaker quickly pivots and presents an alternative option. Olivia's eyes widen slightly in awe as she gazes upon an elegant, mature black gown. She is captivated, realizing this beautiful dress looks just like the one her mother used to wear. Noticing her silent fascination, the dressmaker tentatively hums to grab her attention. Quickly recovering her composure, Olivia closes her eyes and casually agrees. The dressmaker lets out a massive sigh of relief as Olivia finally deems the dress acceptable. The surrounding maids immediately spring into excited action, eagerly offering to select the perfect matching shoes and pointing out the accessories for Lady Olivia. Brushing her hair aside with mature grace, Olivia leaves the rest to her attendants, ordering them to choose something that complements the dress, to which they quickly agree. Olivia quietly observes the hallway as a nervous maid cautiously peeks through the slightly open door. Two maids, one with braided hair and another with an updo, stand exhausted by the window after letting out a heavy sigh. The maids gossip amongst themselves, cruelly noting that Lady Olivia unfortunately possesses weak magic and an incredibly sharp personality to match. Panicking, the bespectacled maid nervously shushes them, pleading to save such dangerous talk for when they return home. Gazing out at the sprawling ducal estate, they wonder aloud what will become of the noble house with such an unpleasant heir set to inherit it. Outside the grand manor, ladies in elegant dresses wait patiently by a horse-drawn carriage on the sunlit cobblestone driveway. Observing the scene from behind a railing, a mysterious figure notes that the group appears to be finished with their shopping trip. Inside the shadowed carriage, Rihanna listens in grim silence as a voice cruelly points out that Olivia's magic is just as pathetically weak as her own. The unseen voice continues speaking to Rihanna, dropping the bombshell that they recently heard a very strange and troubling rumor. The rumor claims that Gerald has a powerful illegitimate child, and he fully intends to bring this child to live within the main estate. Rihanna's eyes widen in absolute shock as she listens to this ridiculous and completely devastating accusation. Clenching her jaw with fierce maternal protectiveness, Rihanna asserts that Olivia is Gerald's only child, vowing she will never forgive him if he allows an illegitimate heir into their home. Trying desperately to comfort herself, she tightly closes her eyes and silently repeats that Olivia is the true heir and everything will be all right. Later that afternoon, Rihanna and little Olivia sit together in the lush, sun-dappled gardens for a peaceful outdoor tea party. A polite maid approaches the table, graciously asking the madam if she would like to have some more tea. The maid suddenly turns her head, letting out a soft gasp as someone unexpectedly approaches their quiet garden table. Recognizing the imposing arrival, the maid quickly bows in deference and respectfully greets her lord. Smiling warmly in a desperate attempt to be polite, she begins to wish him a good morning before her voice trails off under his heavy presence. Gerald glares back over his shoulder with a profoundly dark, intimidating scowl that seems to violently swallow the surrounding light. The poor maid flinches violently backwards, her eyes widening in pure terror at his chilling and completely unprovoked expression. Gerald stands silently with his face shadowed, radiating an intense, unapproachable aura as the terrified maids tremble nearby. Watching him walk away, the maids whisper among themselves in confusion, wondering why his lordship always carries such a terrifyingly stern expression. One maid specifically asks if Gerald doesn't seem to have an especially harsh glare whenever he looks directly at little Lady Olivia. Rihanna overhears the whispering maids, her face falling into a deeply shadowed profile as their painful words pierce her heart. She watches her daughter silently sip her tea, heartbreakingly aware that little Olivia is trying so hard to be the perfect noble child. Putting on a strict maternal front to mask her anxiety, Rihanna firmly instructs Olivia to work hard in her upcoming lessons as well. Without missing a single beat, the young girl looks up with an unwavering, determined gaze and obediently agrees with her mother. Rihanna manages a fragile, bittersweet smile, trying her absolute best to mask the swirling anxieties threatening to break her composure. The very next day, chaos erupts at the grand ducal estate as a panicked voice demands to know what is going on. A flustered maid calls out to Lady Rihanna, gesturing wildly toward a massive pile of wooden crates and asking what on earth they are doing there. The maid nervously explains that a company hired directly by his lordship delivered the crates, claiming they are all full of furniture. Looking deeply unsettled by this unannounced delivery, Rihanna cautiously approaches the boxes and asks the maid what she means. Resting prominently on top of one of the large shipping crates is a piece of sealing tape with the name Eric distinctly written across it. Rihanna's eyes instantly widen to the size of saucers, sheer, unadulterated horror washing over her suddenly pale face. Clutching her chest in a full-blown panic, she mentally repeats the boy's name, Eric, immediately realizing the horrifying implications. Little Olivia turns around from her spot in the hallway, letting out a soft sound of confusion as she spots her mother acting strangely. Olivia calls out for her mother, instantly alarmed as Rihanna suddenly bursts into a sprint and runs past her down the grand corridor. Left standing entirely alone on the expansive carpet, the young girl stares after her fleeing mother in total, bewildered silence. Collapsing heavily against a beautifully carved door, Rihanna breaks down as the dark rumor of Gerald bringing his illegitimate child to live with them is proven true. Hot tears stream uncontrollably down her flushed face as she lets out a pained, heartbreaking sob of utter defeat. Overcome with deep despair and betrayal, Rihanna covers her face with her trembling hands and wails loudly in the empty hall. Night eventually falls over the grand estate, marked by a bright, crescent moon hanging silently in the vast starry sky. Inside the massive, echoing dining room, Gerald and Olivia sit far apart at the impossibly long table, eating their lavish dinner in stiff silence. Breaking the suffocating tension, Gerald looks up from his meal and coldly asks the nervous maid where Rihanna is. The trembling maid quickly bows her head, politely explaining that her ladyship lost her appetite and is currently resting in her bedroom. Gerald's handsome face remains an unreadable mask of ice, showing absolutely no immediate concern for his wife's sudden, mysterious illness. Sitting perfectly still in her oversized chair, little Olivia looks down at her lap with a deeply troubled and somber expression. Gerald slowly shifts his intense, piercing gaze across the long dining table, directing his full, undivided attention toward his young daughter. With a completely flat and unyielding authoritative tone, he firmly calls out Olivia's name. Startled by the sudden direct address, Olivia instantly straightens her posture in a panic and nervously replies to her intimidating father. Receiving a strict summons, the young girl widened her eyes as she was ordered to be at the entrance hall by 10 the following morning. Maintaining her formal obedience, she bowed her head and dutifully agreed to her father's commanding request. Excitement fluttered in her chest as she realized her father had actually spoken to her, assuming this unexpected meeting held great importance. However, a creeping sense of unease soon washed over her delicate features, replacing her initial thrill with lingering apprehension. Staring ahead with a hardened, anxious gaze, she could not shake the terrible feeling brewing deep within her gut. The bright sun illuminated the grand estate the next morning, standing in stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere inside. The sharp, rhythmic clicking of her shoes echoed down the long corridor, marking her steady approach in a meticulously arranged dress. Little Olivia carried herself with refined grace, her flowing gown sweeping the floor as she navigated the massive halls. Pausing before the elegant woman, Olivia dipped into a polite bow and greeted her mother with aristocratic manners. Her mother, draped in a dark and imposing gown, barely offered a cold acknowledgement to her daughter's morning pleasantries. Walking side by side, Olivia's mind raced as she endlessly pondered why her father would specifically request her presence. Staring blankly at the floor, she desperately scoured her memories for any clue regarding the mysterious summons. A chilling premonition flashed through her mind, foretelling that she was destined to meet an illegitimate child, relentlessly bully them until they fell into darkness, and seal a tragic fate. The sudden, absurd thought shattered her composure, leaving her eyes wide with bewilderment at the very concept of an illegitimate sibling. Trembling slightly, she mentally chastised herself for conjuring such dark, irrational thoughts about a child falling into darkness. The disturbing visions refused to fade, causing her to clutch her chest in panic as she questioned her own sanity. Her mother's sharp, questioning gaze pierced through her spiraling anxiety, instantly snapping her back to reality. Scolded to stop losing her composure, the frightened girl immediately straightened up and agreed with her mother's harsh demand. The imposing matriarch forcefully reminded her that she was the proud heir of House Apricot, demanding absolute perfection. A heavy creak interrupted Olivia's frantic apologies, signaling that the dreaded moment had finally arrived. Standing in the blinding light of the doorway, her father's towering silhouette emerged with a small child firmly in tow. Gazing at the boy's worn shoes, Olivia instantly realized that this fragile figure was her father's hidden illegitimate child. Looking up, she was struck by the boy's vibrant red eyes, sensing the immense magical power he inherited directly from their father. Staggering backward in absolute disbelief, she mentally screamed at the impossible realization that this supposed first encounter felt horrifyingly familiar. A heavy wave of dread washed over her as she undeniably recognized the boy standing quietly in the hall. Staring at his timid posture, the grim knowledge of the dark future awaiting this innocent child locked her in a state of paralyzing fear. Completely oblivious to her internal panic, her father stepped forward and prepared to formally introduce the newest member of the family. With a booming, authoritative voice, her father officially declared the young boy's name to be Eric. Eric glanced up with wide, hesitant eyes, silently flinching under the sudden, intense scrutiny of his new family. Olivia's memories surged, recalling that despite being born to a lowly maid, Eric possessed devastating magical power that destined him to become a genius mage. The horrific truth echoed in her mind, revealing that her mother's jealousy would drive them to relentlessly bully the gifted boy. That very torment was the catalyst that would push Eric to fall into darkness, transforming him into the dreaded red-eyed genius mage. She remembered how, from that day onward, she and her mother ruthlessly cornered him, breaking his spirit both physically and mentally. The sheer weight of this inevitable tragedy caused her pupil to shrink in pure, unadulterated terror. Gasping for air, Olivia's face went completely pale as the horrific gravity of her predicted future crushed her chest. Her legs gave out completely, sending her crashing to her knees as her mother shouted her name in shocked alarm. The household staff erupted into absolute panic, rushing forward and desperately asking if their beloved Lady Olivia was hurt. Still reeling from the immense psychological blow, she slowly lifted her head, her face completely drained of color. Forcing a strained smile, she weakly apologized to the frantic crowd, falsely insisting that nothing was wrong. The concerned maids whispered among themselves, assuming the sudden news of an illegitimate child had simply overwhelmed the poor girl's delicate nerves. Staring intensely at her trembling palms, Olivia violently rejected their assumptions, desperately wondering why she had never noticed the truth before. A profound, earth-shattering epiphany finally breached her consciousness, reframing the very fabric of her existence. Strange, vivid visions of a romantic confession flooded her mind, depicting a loving couple basking in glowing light. The phantom memories continued, showing the passionately embracing couple being interrupted by a scandalous gasp in a vibrant garden setting. The pieces rapidly clicked together as she visualized the dramatic, game-like confrontation unfolding before her mind's eye. A terrifying clarity washed over her trembling frame, confirming that her wild, impossible theory was entirely correct. Viewing her own status through a supernatural lens, she definitively confirmed her identity as Olivia Apricot amidst floating game menus. Surrounded by her confused maids and mother, Olivia realized she possessed complete, undeniable knowledge of this fictional world. Her reality was shattered completely as she understood she had been reborn into an insanely popular otome game, specifically cast as the doomed villainess, Olivia. The maids could only stare in baffled silence at their young lady, completely unaware that the grand estate around them was nothing more than a digital stage. Confronting her parents and the young boy, Olivia realizes that she recognizes all of them from an otome game she played in her previous life. Her gaze shifts to the child, confirming that even the fragile Eric is a character she knows from her gaming history. Flashbacks of game screens for characters named Gerald and Eric appear, solidifying her realization that she has been reincarnated into a fictional world. Overwhelmed by the implications of her situation, Olivia begins to sweat as the gravity of her new reality sets in. At the age of 7, on the day she met her father's illegitimate son, Olivia panics internally, wondering how she will navigate this scripted life. She marks this day as the beginning of her real life, the moment her memories of a past existence fully returned. Olivia identifies herself as Olivia Apricot, the classic villainess who bullies the heroine and steals the crown prince's affection. Startled by Olivia's sudden change in expression, a maid asks if anything is wrong, catching the young lady off guard. Olivia realizes she must keep her past life memories a secret, knowing that no one would believe she knows the future. She quickly composes herself, telling the concerned staff it is nothing and asking them not to mind her. The maids continue to stare at their lady, sensed a strange shift in her behavior. While the maids whisper that she is likely in shock over the rumors of the illegitimate child, Olivia is relieved they haven't noticed her true internal state. Olivia reflects on the nature of the villainess, noting that while her new environment might explain a twisted personality, it is no excuse for bullying a stepbrother. She pauses her moral reflection as a new thought enters her mind, narrowing her eyes in focus. Excitedly, she realizes that being in an otome game world means she can witness romantic CG scenes unfold in real life. She immediately scolds herself for acting like a shallow fangirl, clutching her head and trying to refocus on her survival. Her mind returns to the game's plot, where she and her mother were destined to gang up on and bully Eric. Olivia clenches her fist, questioning if it is morally acceptable to let the tragic story play out as originally written. She looks at the boy again, reminded by her conscience that despite his future role, he is currently just a little kid. The young Eric stands shyly in the hall, fidgeting under the weight of the introduction. Olivia continues to observe the child, her mind swirling with the conflicting information of his present innocence and future darkness. She identifies him as the future Yandra and a silver-haired, red-eyed genius mage. Remembering his backstory, she notes that being separated from his mother and bullied by her family is what eventually distorts his personality. However, seeing him in person, Olivia is overwhelmed by how cute he is and is thrilled that a character she loved is standing right there. She catches herself fangirling again, thanking God for the chance to see her favorite character in the flesh. Clearing her throat, Olivia steps forward and formally acknowledges Eric as her younger brother from this day onwards. Internally, she struggles to hide her excitement, knowing she must maintain a proper aristocratic demeanor. She tells Eric they should try to get along, attempting to set a positive tone for their relationship. A silent tension fills the hall as Olivia waits for a response from the boy. Seeing Eric's hesitant reaction, she worries that she was too harsh and has accidentally scared him. She frets over whether her first impression has already ruined their chances of a peaceful future. The boy remains silent, his eyes downcast as he processes the villainess's unexpected words. Eric slowly lifts his head, his wide eyes looking up with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Olivia's internal monologue pleads for friendship, hoping to change the course of their lives. The boy blinks in surprise, looking completely baffled by Olivia's offer of kindness. He glances at his father for guidance while Olivia remains frozen, waiting for his reply. Olivia suffers a cuteness overload as she stares into Eric's wide eyes. She declares she doesn't care if she's a shallow fangirl, as she needs to burn this precious image of little Eric into her soul. The boy continues to look at her, still confused by the sudden change in her behavior. Eric's eyes shimmer as he prepares to speak, his face still holding a hint of a blush. Olivia stares back, her expression unreadable to the outsiders in the room. Finally, the boy manages to speak, stuttering that it is a pleasure to meet her as his sister. He clutches his hands together and adds that he looks forward to being with her. The sheer cuteness of his polite greeting acts as a second critical hit to Olivia's heart. Olivia's internal monologue screams in joy, finding his little bow and adorable nature almost unbearable. She is moved by the word sister, finding it wonderful, and resolves that she will protect him. The word protect echoes in her mind, marking a complete shift from the villainess's original path. She rationalizes that he hasn't done anything wrong and didn't choose to be born into these circumstances. Motivated by the fact that he acknowledged her as his sister, she firmly decides she must protect him at all costs. Olivia concludes that she must do her absolute best to change their destiny and ensure a happy life for her new brother. Scowling at her brother, Olivia sternly criticizes his embarrassing failure to perform a proper bow. Throwing her hand out dramatically, she demands that their father hire a competent tutor to fix the boy's flaws. The father and young boy stand in stunned silence as a cheerful flower blooms brightly atop the girl's head. Beneath her prickly exterior, Olivia internally celebrates her successful performance as a harsh older sister. Instantly regretting her cold tone, she wishes she could have delivered her request with a gentle voice instead. Trembling with silent frustration, she desperately wants Eric to hold his head high and receive the competent tutoring he deserves. Breaking the tense atmosphere, the father clears his throat and calmly agrees to his daughter's demands. He confidently assures her that he will hire a proper tutor for the boy without hesitation. However, he counters with a surprising condition, requesting that she take on the responsibility of teaching Eric as well. Confused by her father's rare smile, Olivia stares blankly while the flower atop her head eagerly accepts the challenge. Pondering the situation, she realizes her father frequently smiles whenever she acts overly harsh. She recalls that he exhibits the exact same amused reaction whenever she harshly scolds the household maids. Her memories paint a clear picture of him grinning and watching her strict antics from a distance. A confused expression crosses her face as the magical flower droops, leaving her wondering about his odd behavior. Pushing her confusion aside, she turns to Eric and haughtily offers to answer any questions he might have. Staring down at his scuffed shoes, she firmly declares they cannot converse while he remains in such a filthy state. She orders him to bathe and change into presentable clothes, while her inner flower gently urges him to rest. Completely unfazed by her strict tone, Eric smiles brightly and offers her his sincere gratitude. Utterly disarmed by his sweet reaction to her awful words, she internally melts and declares him an absolute angel. Stepping in to diffuse the overwhelming cuteness, the father kindly offers to show Eric to his new room. As they walk down the hall, the father whispers affectionately about how ridiculously cute the situation has become. Eric asks what they are talking about, prompting his father to chuckle and promise a later explanation. With the introductions officially concluded, the maids respectfully address Lady Rihanna before Olivia decides to return to her room. Walking alone, Olivia privately celebrates regaining her memories and getting to live with such an adorable little brother. Meanwhile, Eric nervously calls out to his father as they traverse the grand, sunlit hallway. Looking up with bright, eager eyes, the young boy admits he cannot wait until they arrive at their destination. Hesitatingly, Eric asks his father about the strange flower he saw floating right above his sister's head. The father glances back with a knowing smile, surprised and impressed that Eric possesses the ability to see it. He explains that the flower visually reflects Olivia's true emotions and remains invisible to those lacking strong magical power. Noting how wildly the flowers bloomed with affection, the father deduces that Olivia has already taken a massive liking to Eric. Eric stares ahead in quiet realization, finally understanding the warm truth hidden beneath his sister's prickly exterior. Agreeing with his own assessment, the father proudly asks the boy if he finds his sister completely adorable. The narrative formally introduces Olivia Apricot, the Duke's daughter, whose head bears a mysterious magical flower. These magical blooms take on expressive poses, drooping sadly when she cries and blooming vibrantly when she is happy. Duke Gerald, the realm's most powerful mage, quietly enjoys watching the hilarious gap between his daughter's harsh words and her honest floral emotions. This strange and endearing phenomenon all started on the very day Olivia was born into the world. Royal attendants formally congratulated Lord Gerald and Lady Rihanna on the safe arrival of their crying newborn. Overcome with immense joy, Gerald covered his face and thanked God for finally blessing him with a child. His exhausted wife smiled gently from the bed and softly called out to her darling husband. She happily pointed out that their newborn daughter had inherited his exact hair color. Cradling the infant, Rihanna expressed her heartfelt hope that little Olivia would grow up to be just as bright as Gerald. Suddenly, a small, cheerful flower sprouted into existence and cooed atop the baby's tiny head. Gerald froze in his tracks, his eyes widening in pure shock at the unexpected magical anomaly. Staring in disbelief, he questioned why a literal flower was blooming right on his newborn daughter's head. He leaned in closer, utterly perplexed by the strange, glowing plant sprouting from her hair. Watching the baby smile, he slowly began to piece together the truth behind the bizarre magic. He realized with absolute certainty that the mysterious flower was actively reflecting the infant's joyous feelings. Overwhelmed by the sheer adorableness of the discovery, he instinctively slapped a hand over his mouth. Unable to contain himself, he giggled into his hand and declared the sight far too cute to handle. Trembling wildly, Gerald completely lost his composure over his infant daughter's overwhelming cuteness. Turning his back to the ornate wooden door, Gerald softly instructs the staff to call him if they need anything before retreating to his magical research. The household maids and arresting Rihanna watch in stunned, breathless silence as a miraculous, glowing light unexpectedly emanates from the grand bed. Overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the magical anomaly, Gerald desperately covers his face to hide his profoundly emotional reaction. Peeking through his trembling fingers, the powerful mage dramatically declares that his newborn daughter is simply too breathtakingly cute for this mortal world. However, he solemnly notes that her expressive emotional reflections abruptly ceased the moment her grueling, aristocratic etiquette training began. Even so, he fondly remembers how she used to express boundless joy over sweet treats and radiate pure excitement just from seeing him approach. Snapped abruptly back to the present moment, little Eric notes how deeply his father loves his sister, eagerly wishing to forge that same close bond. Gerald warmly reassures the anxious boy that everyone undeniably loves Olivia, confidently predicting that the two siblings will get along perfectly. The narrative seamlessly shifts forward in time, showcasing the imposing, sunlit architecture of the Duke's sprawling estate a few days later. Eric eagerly holds up his heavy study book, proudly flashing a brilliant smile as he asks his older sister to inspect his perfectly spelled words. Instead of praising his amazing academic progress, Olivia haughtily scolds him for acting childish and getting overly excited about something so remarkably trivial. Completely undeterred by her icy demeanor, the cheerful boy proudly demonstrates his refined ability to set down porcelain teacups without making a single sound. Maintaining her severely prickly facade, she ruthlessly dismisses his genius-level achievement as nothing more than the bare minimum of basic high society etiquette. The grand, intricately carved ceiling of the estate looms quietly over the tense, one-sided sibling interaction. Later, in the absolute privacy of her room, Olivia collapses face-first onto her plush mattress with a heavy, deeply frustrated groan. Sliding pathetically down against the luxurious silk sheets, she silently agonizes over the horrible fact that she spoke harshly to the boy yet again. Vividly envisioning Eric as a literal, glowing angel, she bitterly laments her uncontrollable urge to act like a strict tyrant towards such a pure-hearted child. Thrashing her legs in a dramatic, tearful tantrum, she desperately cries out that she is being utterly awful to him instead of acting like a fiercely protective older sister. Pausing her emotional breakdown, a deeply perplexed expression crosses her flushed face as she suddenly realizes something incredibly odd about the unfolding situation. She astutely notes that despite repeating her flawlessly harsh villainous lines from the original game, Eric shows absolutely zero signs of falling into villainous darkness. In fact, she vividly recalls that every single time his rigorous studies or etiquette improve, the boy comes running straight to her with eyes full of pure adoration. She remembers harshly lecturing him in the sunlit corridor, reminding him that a duke's son should easily master such tasks without displaying improper, unrefined excitement. Completely unfazed by her strict reprimands, Eric simply clenched his tiny fists and earnestly promised to work even harder to finally earn her precious acknowledgement. Flashing back to that very moment in the hallway, she abruptly turns her back on the startled boy and dramatically storms away with a swish of her floral dress. Completely unseen by her, the magical flower atop her head blooms with overwhelming joy, proudly cheering them both on to continue doing their absolute best. Eric stares after her retreating figure with shining, starstruck eyes, completely captivated by the unspoken warmth radiating from her magical floral companion. Back in the present reality, Olivia practically shrieks in absolute terror as Eric suddenly comes sprinting down the hall, happily calling out to his beloved sister. Sweating profusely as she sprints away, she desperately demands to know why he is chasing her, wondering if he is actively trying to assassinate her with his weaponized cuteness. With a triumphant, joyous shout, the adorable boy lunges forward and catches her off guard, wrapping her in a tight, breathtakingly affectionate squeeze. Olivia's heart pounds wildly against her ribs as she stares down at the deeply blushing boy, her magical flower practically vibrating with overwhelming anxious energy. Gazing up at her with unwavering, innocent determination, Eric earnestly promises to dedicate his life to doing his absolute best to make her proud. Wide-eyed and completely rendered speechless, she listens in stunned silence as he sweetly begs for permission to remain by her side forever. Leaning in intimately close, the innocent boy delivers an emotionally devastating finishing blow by cheerfully declaring his profound, unconditional love for his sister. Completely short-circuiting from the massive emotional overload, Olivia internally screams in sheer terror as she struggles to process the adorable, heart-stopping assault. Gripping her head in sheer, unadulterated panic, she mentally completely breaks down as theoretical lightning strikes behind her, entirely defeated by her little brother's lethal cuteness. Eric's bright, loving smile remains permanently etched into her fractured mind, warmly solidifying his earnest plea to stay together for the rest of their lives. While Olivia visibly panics and frantically wonders what on earth to do, her magical flower rapidly blooms and pops with an explosive, undeniably clear display of joy. Completely overwhelmed by the intense surge of affection, she silently clutches her trembling hands to her chest, her face burning a deep crimson beneath her long bangs. Directly above her head, a pair of magical flowers absolutely lose their minds, openly crying and swooning as they bask in the thrilling, undeniable happiness. Realizing the magical flowers are completely giving away her heavily guarded true feelings, Eric happily points out that his sister clearly feels the exact same way. Suddenly, the tender, sibling bonding moment is abruptly interrupted as their elegant mother, Rihanna, steps gracefully into the rose-filled hallway. Rihanna stares down with a chillingly cool, unreadable expression, casting a silent, intimidating shadow over the suddenly quiet children. Ever the sweet, accommodating angel, Eric politely turns his attention to Rihanna and earnestly asks if she would like to join them for their upcoming studies. Rihanna's sharp, piercing eyes narrow slightly at the innocent request, maintaining a fiercely stoic and utterly impenetrable demeanor. Without uttering a single word, the imposing matriarch simply closes her eyes and dramatically turns her head away from the eager young boy. Eric blinks in mild, innocent surprise as his mother silently turns her back and begins to walk away down the grand, echoing corridor. Maintaining his impressively positive attitude despite the cold rejection, the boy simply smiles and assumes his mother must just be incredibly busy. Olivia watches the chilling interaction unfold with a tense, sweaty grimace, intrinsically knowing there is much more to her mother's silent, calculated departure. The scene abruptly shifts to the vast, painfully formal dining room, where Eric sits completely isolated at the massive table while Rihanna sits distantly at the far end. Rihanna casts a subtle, piercingly intense side glance toward the oblivious boy, her stoic facade perfectly hiding a complex, unspoken storm of maternal emotions. Eric happily savors his meal at the dining table, displaying a bright and innocent smile that radiates pure joy. Across the room, Mother sighs heavily as a dark cloud of annoyance and profound exhaustion visibly mounts around her. Standing quietly by an ornate mirror, Olivia attentively watches her mother navigate the palpable tension filling the silent room. Trying to abruptly end the interaction, Mother dismissively tells the boy not to worry about it while he nervously stammers an apology. Turning her back to the attentive maid, Mother coldly announces that she is exhausted and heading to bed first. The grand, heavily ornamented double doors slam shut with a resounding thud, physically isolating the matriarch from the rest of the household. Eric flashes a remarkably cheerful smile while apologizing, humbly admitting he still has an immense amount to learn about proper etiquette. Gazing up with sincere concern and unwavering innocence, Eric urges his sister not to worry about him and to get some much-needed rest. Later that night, Olivia lies wide awake in bed clutching her teddy bear, desperately wondering what she should do to fix this shattered family. Deep in thought beneath her heavy blankets, she solemnly reflects on the deeply strained dynamic between her mother and young Eric. Olivia guiltily acknowledges that ever since Eric arrived, Mother has completely ignored him, while her own attitude toward the boy has been tragically worse. She bitterly laments treating him so harshly when all her heart truly desires is to be joyful with him and offer genuine praise. Gripping her sheets tightly with newfound determination, Olivia makes a fierce vow that everything will be entirely different tomorrow. Eric calls out warmly to his sister as he eagerly approaches the sunlit patio. Taking a proactive step toward reconciliation, Olivia graciously invites him to join her for a special tea time featuring freshly baked macarons. Eric hurries over with uncontained excitement, thoroughly thrilled at the chance to showcase exactly how much his etiquette has improved. The two siblings sit together at an elegant wrought iron garden table, sharing a quiet moment under the watchful eye of a silent maid. A pristine tower of delicious macarons sits beautifully plated as Eric nervously but hopefully addresses his older sister. The serene atmosphere of the garden tea party completely surrounds them as they settle down to enjoy their decadent treats. Olivia maintains a stoic, composed facade while Eric shyly attempts to convey his immense happiness at simply being able to spend time with her. Squeezing his shorts nervously, Eric vulnerably confesses that he always felt deeply lonely as an only child because Mother was perpetually occupied. Flashing a blindingly bright and pure smile, the young boy joyfully thanks Olivia for everything, declaring his life is now incredibly happy every single day. A dramatic high-impact zoom perfectly captures Olivia's eyes widening in sheer, overwhelming shock at his absolute and undeserved purity. Outwardly dismissing him as being overly dramatic, Olivia internally melts into a puddle over how unbelievably precious her little brother truly is. Cold panic instantly sets in as she realizes the cruel bullying they subject him to will inevitably twist this angelic child into a deranged Yandra. Her soft expression sharply tightens into a fierce glare as a massive wave of protective determination washes entirely over her. Clenching her fists with absolute certainty, Olivia refuses to let that dark fate unfold and aggressively vows that she must intervene immediately. Glaring forward with resolute purpose, she officially decides she cannot simply play her assigned role as the villainess if she wants to effectively change his tragic future. Refusing to stand by idly and let tragedy strike, her inner spirit ignites with the undeniable, burning necessity to take immediate action. Marching directly up to her mother's chamber that very night, Olivia declares the time is now and knocks firmly on the massive door. Granted formal permission to enter the private quarters, she bravely asks the imposing matriarch if they can have a deeply important word. Olivia steps cautiously but purposefully into the grand, dimly lit bedroom to finally confront the source of their family's misery. Rihanna stands elegantly silhouetted by the tall, draped window, gazing out silently into the quiet, star-speckled night sky. Glowing with a powerful aura of unwavering resolve, Olivia firmly informs her mother that she has something extremely important to discuss. Obliging her young daughter's highly serious tone, the matriarch motions calmly for them to take a seat together on the lavish sofa. Olivia focuses her absolute, undivided attention on her incredibly imposing mother, the formidable Rihanna Apricot. She deeply reflects on how Rihanna's strict upbringing was meant to earn their father's elusive acknowledgement, only to have that grueling work shattered by his secret child. Remembering her past life where Rihanna seemed absolutely terrifying, Olivia now profoundly understands her mother was simply a broken woman horribly betrayed by the husband she loved. She clearly realizes this single, devastating betrayal is the exact foundational reason both her past self and her deeply wounded mother descended into ruthless villainy. Despite her ironclad resolve, Olivia's eyes tremble slightly in the heavy silence as the terrifying weight of the impending confrontation fully settles into her bones. Gnawing anxiety rapidly creeps into her mind as she wonders if this bold, unprecedented intervention will merely push her emotionally volatile mother further into a defensive corner. She terrifyingly ponders if she will end up being utterly despised just like Eric, or if her proud mother will even bother to listen to her desperate plea. Shutting her eyes tightly to aggressively banish the rising doubts, Olivia forcefully reminds her wavering heart that she absolutely must speak up now. Looking her mother completely dead in the eye with zero hesitation, Olivia fiercely and proudly declares that Eric is her little brother. Rihanna stares back in completely stunned silence, her eyes wide as she is completely taken aback by her young daughter's sudden, highly authoritative proclamation. Pressing her newly found advantage, Olivia explicitly and courageously demands that her mother start paying far more positive attention to the innocent, neglected boy. Rihanna turns her face slightly away, wordlessly and heavily processing the incredibly shocking confrontation delivered by her own daughter. Olivia gently but firmly validates her mother's agonizing inability to forgive, yet vehemently insists that their treacherous father is the only one at fault, not the innocent Eric. Sitting tall and completely uncompromising on the grand sofa, Olivia formally reminds her hesitant mother that Eric undeniably shares the sacred bloodline of the Apricot family. Bracing herself entirely for the inevitable, explosive fallout, Olivia forcefully clenches her trembling fist as she anxiously awaits her mother's final, life-altering judgment. Pointing fiercely, Olivia passionately declares that her mother is the Duchess, a deeply dignified lady whom she respects immensely. Shock widening her mother's eye, Olivia desperately begs her to hold her head high just as she has always instructed her daughter to do. Acknowledging that the sudden arrival of an illegitimate child might have been overwhelmingly painful, the brave girl refuses to back down, shouting that even so, they must act righteously. Leaning forward with fiery conviction, Olivia insists that the mother she knows would raise Eric properly like any other child, passionately arguing that this honorable strength is exactly why she is so highly respected within high society. A heavy, stunned silence utterly engulfs the grand room as the matriarch simply stares at her small but fiercely determined daughter across the coffee table. Instantly losing all her bravado, Olivia internally panics over actually saying those bold words, nervously clenching her skirt because she completely lacks the courage to look her imposing mother in the eye anymore. Breaking the unbearable tension, the Duchess finally speaks up, calmly admitting that she is genuinely surprised by the confrontation. Sitting tall and composed, her mother confesses she never imagined Olivia would say something like that, let alone audaciously argue with her own mother. Olivia cowers slightly, keeping her gaze anxiously locked downward as she braces for what she assumes will be a terrifying reprimand. Squeezing her eyes shut in sheer dread, the young girl prepares herself to face the matriarch's legendary, chilling wrath. Instead of unleashing furious anger, a profoundly gentle, radiant smile blooms across the Duchess's face, completely softening her usually stern features. Peeking open a hesitant eye, Olivia gasps in utter astonishment at the completely unexpected, tender expression radiating from the woman before her. Staring in bewildered awe, the young girl struggles to completely process the miraculous sight, realizing that her famously terrifying mother is actually showing genuine warmth. A profound wave of relief and disbelief washes over Olivia as she silently registers that her mother is genuinely, breathtakingly smiling at her. From that monumental day onward, the oppressive atmosphere in the grand house begins to noticeably shift, marked by the Duchess gracefully inviting her daughter to join her for some tea. Clasping his hands together with overflowing joy, a brightly smiling Eric cheerfully notes how rare it is for his sister to invite him, declaring that he is incredibly happy. His innocent excitement is abruptly halted as he freezes, his eyes widening in pure shock as he notices an unexpected guest. Approaching the sunlit garden table, Eric nervously stammers out a greeting to the Duchess, who sits quietly awaiting his arrival. Gripped by intense intimidation, the small boy immediately averts his gaze and shrinks into himself, entirely unsure of how to navigate this unprecedented situation. The Duchess gazes silently at the deeply anxious boy, a complex mix of melancholy and quiet resolution shimmering in her observant eyes. Breaking the heavy quiet, she gently instructs both children to please sit down before their freshly poured tea gets cold. Olivia reflects that during their very first shared tea time, they barely spoke a single word to one another while Eric fearfully stammered his tense compliance. These incredibly stiff, painfully awkward afternoon tea sessions continued stubbornly for many quiet days, slowly building a fragile bridge between the fractured family members. Pausing mid-sip from her elegant china cup, the Duchess finally shatters the pervasive silence by directly and purposefully addressing Eric. Startled by the sudden engagement, the young boy nervously stammers, utterly bewildered as to why the imposing matriarch is suddenly speaking directly to him. As Eric frantically replies, Olivia practically glows with internal triumph, thrilled that her mother has finally called the boy by his actual name for the very first time. Averting her gaze with a slight embarrassed flush, the Duchess strictly but kindly points out that he really needs to work on his etiquette and suggests he should study alongside Olivia. Solidifying his rightful place, she firmly reminds the bewildered boy that he is a true part of House Apricot too, asking for his understanding. Both children flinch in monumental, jaw-dropping shock at this profound display of acceptance, completely floored by the matriarch's sudden warmth. Attempting to quickly recover her famously dignified composure, the Duchess clears her throat softly, brushing past her rare moment of emotional vulnerability. Ever since that breakthrough, the garden fills with joyous energy as Eric passionately pledges to work hard to catch up with his sister, while Olivia beams with absolute pride for him. It appears as though a massive burden has been magically lifted from the Duchess's weary shoulders, allowing her to finally treat both children as complete equals with a strict but deeply genuine affection. This newfound maternal warmth blossoms into beautiful daily routines, and sometimes it leads to entirely unexpected but highly heartwarming family developments. Standing formally in the grand hallway, the stoic Duke is suddenly approached by his illegitimate son, who nervously attempts to bond with him. Masterfully intervening, Olivia swiftly grabs Eric and loudly declares they must go study, urging their parents to please take their time alone together. Left entirely to their own devices by the scheming children, the estranged Duke and Duchess find themselves sitting across from one another at a lavishly set tea table. Glancing awkwardly at the pastries, they slowly realize they have been beautifully set up, confessing to one another that Eric and Olivia individually invited them for tea. A rare, genuinely soft smile finally breaks across the Duke's stoic face as he warmly chuckles that he never truly knows what those clever children are up to. Gazing across the table at his beautiful wife, the Duke allows the thick, historically painful ice between them to finally begin melting in the afternoon sun. Mirroring his quiet affection, the Duchess smiles softly over her steaming teacup and gently agrees with her husband's fond assessment. Meanwhile, Olivia sternly but lovingly lectures her little brother, working even harder than before just to set a flawlessly good example for the boy. The Duke softly murmurs his profound understanding as he intimately watches the peaceful scene unfold over the delicate rim of his teacup. Filled with immense parental pride, he emotionally remarks that their precious Olivia has truly grown up into an incredibly remarkable young woman. Hearing her husband speak so tenderly about their beloved daughter, thick tears of overwhelming joy and immense relief aggressively well up in the Duchess's eyes. Clutching the jeweled brooch at her collar, the Duchess weeps freely while flashing a devastatingly beautiful, luminous smile of pure agreement. The Duke closes his eyes in quiet, absolute contentment, deeply grateful for the miraculous, hard-won peace that has finally graced their fractured home. Back in the study, a comically stressed Olivia groans that she just cannot focus on her work, intensely worried about whether her parents are actually getting along. Completely unbothered by her frantic anxiety, Eric simply smiles with unwavering, innocent confidence in their parents' newly forged bond. Looking warmly at his frantic sister, Eric gently reassures her not to worry, absolutely certain that their mother and father will be perfectly all right. Calling out to her with profound, sibling affection, the young boy happily grounds his sister back into the beautiful, peaceful reality they have built together. Exclaiming with absolute certainty that solving the hard equations will convince them, a determined voice cuts through the quiet atmosphere. A young girl with long, straight hair and wide, focused eyes stares ahead with deep, unwavering concentration. Glowing with sisterly pride as a triumphant flower icon blooms above her head, the girl agrees to hurry up and finish studying with the eager boy beside her. Spotting his mother in the grand hallway, the bright-eyed boy named Eric rushes forward with an incredibly angelic demeanor. Observing his calm and slightly reserved nature, it becomes clear that he shares a similar, inexpressive temperament with their emotionally distant father. Believing the stoic patriarch would actually be delighted deep down, a gentle suggestion is made for Eric to try asking him for a small souvenir. The elegant mother looks on with a soft, surprised expression while Eric beams with pure, infectious, and radiant joy. Thanks to Eric's earnest and insightful advice, the awkward distance that once kept them apart slowly begins to close. Declaring his departure with a cheerful, energetic farewell, the boy heads off beneath a bright, beautifully cloudy sky. Diligently gripping a feather quill, Eric enthusiastically exchanges heartfelt, handwritten letters with his real mother, Emily, completely altering the game's original narrative. Unlike the strict, lonely isolation of the past, the young boy is now generously allowed to visit her from time to time. Watching this heartwarming and positive development unfold, the young girl named Olivia smiles softly with immense, genuine satisfaction. Embracing the fiercely smiling Eric, his mother feels an overwhelming wave of relief, thoroughly convinced she no longer has to worry about him falling into darkness. However, that fleeting, comforting sense of peace is abruptly shattered as the time to head back draws near. Standing quietly outside the partially open double doors, Olivia prepares to fetch Eric while reflecting warmly on how exceptionally kind her step-parents have been to her. Just as she approaches the wooden frame, a sudden gasp escapes her lips as she overhears a startling fragment of conversation. Inside the sunlit room, the gentle mother softly instructs Eric to do his absolute best so as not to disgrace his late father's revered name. Frozen in utter, wide-eyed disbelief, Olivia's mind races in chaotic panic as she realizes this implies Eric is not actually her father's biological son. The heavy, echoing words regarding his late father's legacy repeat relentlessly in the tense, suffocating atmosphere. Standing completely paralyzed in the corridor, Olivia stares blankly with wide, shocked eyes as the monumental truth shatters her previous understanding. Spiraling into an overwhelming panic as imaginary withered flowers pop frantically from her head, she struggles desperately to process the revelation about his late father. Inside the quiet room, Eric suddenly flinches, his sharp instincts picking up on a subtle, unexpected presence nearby. Sensing the immediate tense shift in the air, the confused girl wonders frantically what that sudden, sharp reaction is supposed to mean. Turning his head cautiously toward the heavy doors, Eric calls out softly, asking if his sister is lingering out there. Trembling violently as a distressed flower icon wilts above her head, Olivia panics over how he managed to magically detect her concealed presence. Peeking nervously and guiltily from behind the thick doorframe, she hesitates, her pale face practically dripping with cold sweat. Stepping fully into the room and bowing her head in deep shame, Olivia apologizes terribly for accidentally overhearing their deeply private conversation. The solemn mother looks down with a sorrowful, heavy gaze, addressing the young eavesdropping girl directly as Lady Olivia. Summoning her wavering courage, Olivia looks up with earnest, determined eyes and politely implores the older woman to tell her more about this hidden past. Standing gracefully yet mournfully in the center of the quiet room, the mother gazes at Eric with a complex, heavy mixture of love and lingering sadness. Surrendering to the inevitable truth of the moment, she softly promises to reveal absolutely everything to the bewildered young girl. Gesturing gently toward the polished wooden table, the mother kindly invites Olivia to have a seat alongside young Eric. Taking her place anxiously at the round table, Olivia immediately presses for clarifying details regarding this mysterious late father that was just mentioned. Closing her eyes to gather her fractured, painful memories, the mother solemnly confirms the startling inquiry with a single breath. With a heavy, resolute heart, she reveals that her beloved husband, Eric's true father, was actually Lord Gerald's younger brother. The sheer magnitude of the shocking familial revelation hits Olivia like a physical blow, leaving her eyes trembling in absolute, terrified shock. Mentally constructing a rapid family tree, Olivia gasps in profound realization that Eric is not her half-brother at all, but rather her biological cousin. Both children sit in stunned, silent awe as the weary mother watches them absorb the heavy, complicated family lineage. Blushing furiously after realizing she accidentally raised her voice, Olivia listens raptly as the mother explains that her forbidden love forced them to run away together. Because of that defiant, scandalous romantic choice, her devoted husband was brutally disowned, leaving just the two of them to survive alone against the world. After her husband tragically passed away from a severe illness, Lord Gerald mercifully reached out to them in their direst, most vulnerable moment of need. Sitting quietly and respectfully at the vast table, Eric absorbs the painful history of his parents' tragic past with unwavering, solemn focus. The mother firmly clarifies that she worries deeply for Eric, but she has absolutely no intention of begrudging Lord Gerald's generous help. Expressing immense, heartfelt gratitude for everything they have done, she formally and respectfully asks them to leave Eric's future under her meticulous care. Despite her deep, unwavering thankfulness, she insists that she must remain fiercely independent to properly honor her son's upbringing. Smiling brightly through the lingering pain, she declares her unwavering desire to find honest work and support herself, otherwise she would never be able to face Eric. Acknowledging her admirable, steadfast resolve, Lord Gerald simply agreed to her terms and instructed her to come with him. Arriving at a grand, imposing architectural structure, Lord Gerald confidently announces their final destination. He introduces the magnificent building as the biggest merchant house in the area, a highly practical place that ignores noble affairs so she can work in total peace. Overwhelmed by his staggering kindness and thoughtful protection, the mother looks up with eyes brimming with tearful, profound gratitude. Bowing her head in deep gratitude, the young woman fervently thanks them for their incredible kindness. Gripping her broom tightly, Emily explains that while every day is grueling, becoming a maid for the wealthy merchant family was entirely worth it. Sitting across from the attentive children, she solemnly declares her unwavering desire to become a mother that Eric can truly be proud of. Smiling through her lingering sorrow, she admits that throwing herself into her exhausting work distracts her from how terribly much she misses her son. Listening intently to the heartfelt confession, Olivia silently reflects on what an incredibly kind and beautiful person Miss Emily truly is. Clasping her hands together fondly, Emily recalls how her late husband always lovingly told her he enjoyed seeing her work so passionately hard. A heavy, somber silence falls over the room as the weight of her tragic romantic history sinks into the quiet atmosphere. Staring down with a tense, conflicted expression, young Eric hesitates nervously as he wrestles with the monumental secret he carries. Breaking the heavy tension, Eric turns to his sister and confesses that listing him as an illegitimate child was simply easier since his real father had been completely disowned. He further admits he desperately wanted to tell the truth, but their strict father firmly believed it was safer if as few people as possible knew the dangerous reality. Bowing his head in deep, miserable shame, the young boy sincerely apologizes to Olivia for deceiving her for so long. Processing the magnitude of the elaborate cover-up, Olivia hesitates to call it a malicious lie, though keeping such an important secret is undeniably staggering. Wide-eyed and completely speechless, the young girl stares blankly ahead as she carefully reevaluates her entire understanding of her family's complex history. Overwhelmed by residual guilt and traumatic memories, Eric shivers visibly, his small frame trembling under the crushing weight of his confession. Feeling a sudden surge of intense empathy, Olivia gently notes how utterly terrifying it must have been for him to lose his father and immediately be shipped off to live with his uncle. Startled by her sudden, overwhelming compassion, Eric flinches backward with wide, incredibly vulnerable eyes. Blooming a cheerful imaginary flower above her head, Olivia quickly waves off his anxieties and confidently assures him that the complicated deception doesn't bother her at all. The heavy, anxious tension in the sunlit room finally begins to dissipate as the three of them settle into a quiet, understanding peace. Basking in her absolute, unapologetic adoration, Olivia declares fiercely that whether he is her cousin or her half-brother, he will always remain her precious little brother. Looking thoughtfully toward the side, she quietly admits that this shocking revelation has entirely changed her previous impression of their stoic father. Relief violently washes over her as she joyfully celebrates the fact that her supposedly workaholic father never actually messed around and got a random maid pregnant. Determined to clear the air completely, Olivia insists they must tell their mother the truth together upon returning, which Eric accepts with eager enthusiasm. Looking down at his teacup with a sudden, nervous flush, the young boy hesitates before offering one final, deeply personal confession. Beaming with bright, joyful tears welling in his innocent eyes, Eric happily declares that simply being her little brother makes him incredibly happy. Utterly overwhelmed by a critical hit of pure cuteness, Olivia internally squeals in absolute delight as the imaginary flower on her head flutters wildly. Staring blankly ahead as the newly revealed narrative clicks into place, a quiet sense of profound understanding washes over the listener. True to their unified promise, the siblings immediately seek out their elegant mother upon returning to the grand mansion to inform her that Eric is actually their uncle's biological son. Resting her chin thoughtfully on her hand, the sophisticated mother sighs gracefully, noting that keeping such a massive secret from his own family is exactly the kind of frustrating thing her husband would do. A soft, breathless sigh of immense relief escapes her parted lips as the heavy burden of assumed infidelity finally lifts from her elegant shoulders. Sitting perfectly still, Olivia watches her mother's peaceful, unbothered reaction with wide, highly attentive eyes. Internally celebrating the successful confession, the young girl feels a massive wave of joy knowing her mother is genuinely relieved by the cleared-up misunderstanding. Recalling the chaotic timeline, the mother explains that right around the time she got pregnant, her brother-in-law was abruptly sent overseas for work and wasn't expected to return for years. She admits it is incredibly overwhelming to suddenly learn that her disgraced brother-in-law eloped, was disowned, and then tragically died from a severe illness. However, she playfully waves off the tragic family drama, noting with a wry smile that the stressful rumors about Gerald having an illegitimate child were far worse for her fragile heart. Her elegant, sweeping eyelashes lower softly as a quiet, lingering sorrow for the young boy's immense suffering reflects deeply in her darkened gaze. Acknowledging the tragic reality that the poor boy had already lost his real father, she gently expresses her profound, empathetic understanding of the. Sitting formally on the ornate, plush sofa, Olivia marks this emotional conversation as a beautiful, pivotal turning point in their evolving family dynamic. From that defining moment onward, the incredibly relieved and highly affectionate mother began fiercely doting on Eric even more than she had before. Enjoying a serene, perfectly brewed cup of afternoon tea, Olivia smiles contentedly as a warm, peaceful atmosphere completely envelopes the sunny estate garden. A bright, energetic new day dawns over the magnificent mansion as Eric bounds enthusiastically forward with a highly cheerful morning greeting. Greeting him warmly in the grand hallway, Olivia is pleasantly surprised when the observant boy immediately points out her brand-new, beautifully tailored dress. Chuckling softly with a delighted flush, she playfully asks if the elegant new outfit truly suits her. Beaming with absolute, unwavering adoration, Eric proudly declares that he notices everything about her hair and clothes, fiercely insisting that anything looks perfect on his beloved sister. Flattered and slightly overwhelmed by his intense, fairy-like devotion, Olivia internally notes that his intense sister-complex tendencies just keep growing exponentially stronger. Blushing fiercely while nervously clutching her chest, she stammers awkwardly that he is flattering her far too much and causing her immense embarrassment. Quickly recovering her dignified composure, she cheerfully rallies her adoring brother to do their absolute best with their rigorous academic studies that day. Standing quietly by the sunlit window frame, the young girl gazes thoughtfully out at the vibrant, rustling foliage with a serene and hopeful expression. Smiling warmly with bright, hopeful eyes, the young boy finally feels entirely secure and deeply cherished within his wonderful new household. Looking down with a tender, incredibly affectionate gaze, the elegant adoptive mother finds her heart completely full of love for her newly restored family. Gripping her sturdy wooden broom with a soft, contented smile, the devoted maid Emily finds quiet, profound joy in watching her precious son thrive beautifully from afar. Resolving to fulfill her duties as the eldest daughter of House Apricot, a determined young girl mentally prepares herself for a difficult confrontation. The diminutive, blonde-haired Olivia marches purposefully down the expansive, sunlit corridor of the estate, her dark dress swishing with every heavy step. Pausing outside a massive wooden door, she knocks firmly and politely announces her intention to have a serious word with her father. A deep, resonant voice calls from within the grand office, inviting her inside while expressing a hint of genuine surprise at her unexpected visit. Taking a deep, steadying breath to calm her lingering anxieties, Olivia steels her nerves before bravely reaching for the brass doorknob. She pushes the heavy door open and respectfully excuses herself as she steps into the room, instantly feeling the intimidating weight of her father's presence at his desk. Staring up at his perpetually stoic face, she nervously wonders aloud just how long it has truly been since they last shared a proper, meaningful conversation. Her father casually acknowledges the growing distance between them, attributing his constant absence to the demanding and unrelenting nature of his business trips. Shuffling her small shoes hesitantly against the polished floor, she listens nervously as he formally inquires about the specific nature of her sudden visit. Mustering her aristocratic courage, she confronts him directly, demanding to know why he had deliberately kept the truth of young Eric's story hidden from their family. She flinches slightly under the intense weight of her own bold question, her blonde hair falling forward to shadow her deeply uncertain expression. Recalling a tender memory of her mother warmly embracing the boy, Olivia earnestly clarifies that she genuinely understands her father's protective concern for Eric's well-being. However, her tone rapidly shifts to sorrow as she reveals that both she and her mother were profoundly wounded by his secretive, isolating actions. The usually composed patriarch freezes in absolute shock, his eyes widening to comical proportions as the devastating accusation finally registers in his mind. A whirlwind of profound confusion and sudden guilt washes over him as he struggles to comprehend exactly how his well-intentioned decisions had caused such pain. Leaning frantically over his massive desk, he begs for an explanation, only to be completely derailed when Olivia meekly admits they believed he was harboring a secret affair. Erupting from his leather chair like a struck match, he slams his hands onto the desk and bellows his utter disbelief at the outrageous assumption. Terrified by his sudden explosive outburst, the little girl instantly shrinks back into herself, whimpering in absolute fear that she has provoked his terrible wrath. His blazing anger evaporates in an instant, replaced by a cold spike of panic as he realizes his towering, aggressive presence is actively terrifying his own child. Desperately denying any possibility of infidelity within his own mind, he agonizes over the realization that his foolish mistakes have inadvertently wounded his flower-like daughter. Misinterpreting his intense internal panic for seething rage, a trembling Olivia cowers under what she perceives as an unusually terrifying and menacing glare. Trying to hide his own crushing guilt, the awkward father deliberately averts his eyes, leaving a deeply confused Olivia to wonder why his distant gaze refuses to meet hers. Pushed to her emotional breaking point by his apparent dismissal, she tearfully blurts out her long-held fear that he has actually despised her since long before Eric arrived. A chaotic swarm of question marks circles the bewildered father's mind as he desperately tries to process the completely unfathomable idea of ever hating his own beloved child. Blinking in mild surprise as his terrifying aura seems to unexpectedly short-circuit, the little girl momentarily drops her defensive posture to stare at him. Gathering the last scattered shreds of her aristocratic courage, she clenches her fists and respectfully but firmly demands his full, undivided attention. Casting aside her own emotional safety, she boldly declares that the true root of all this suffering is his persistent and agonizing lack of communication with his family. Even if he cannot bring himself to speak to her directly, she passionately begs him to at least start conversing with her mother to heal the growing rift in their home. A crushing weight of profound failure settles onto the father's broad shoulders as the brutal reality of his unintentional emotional neglect finally pierces his thick skull. While Olivia mistakenly assumes his devastated silence is quiet fury, he is internally screaming in agony, entirely baffled as to how his overwhelming love translated into inflicting such deep pain. Panicking at his dark silence, Olivia dramatically wraps up her desperate plea, firmly reiterating her noble duty to demand better communication for her family's sake before he can erupt. Yielding to her lingering terror, she rapidly apologizes for interrupting his important schedule and swiftly prepares for a hasty, tactical retreat from the room. Fleeing the suffocatingly tense atmosphere of the study, she slips through the doorway and forcefully pulls the heavy wooden door shut behind her. Left entirely alone in the deafening silence of his grand office, the stunned patriarch reflects on his foolish delusion that merely providing for his family was enough to show his affection. Heartwarming images of his radiant wife Rihanna and his fiercely adorable daughter bloom vividly in his mind, reminding him of the precious treasures he has been foolishly neglecting. Gripped by the terrifying prospect of losing their affection forever, he violently rejects the idea of causing them any further emotional harm through his silence. With his priorities finally realigned by his young daughter's scolding, he reaches a simple, undeniable conclusion about exactly how to mend his fractured family. Straightening his posture with newfound unshakable resolve, he solemnly vows that starting this very evening, the stifling silence in their household will finally end. The scene shifts rapidly to the opulent family dining room, where the warm glow of the evening meal sets the perfect stage for his crucial test. Still deeply embarrassed by her earlier emotional outburst, an intensely flustered Olivia silently agonizes over having to face her intimidating father so soon. Sitting rigidly at the head of the long table, the socially inept patriarch stares intensely into the void, fiercely battling his own internal awkwardness to find the right opening words. Breaking the suffocating silence with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, he bluntly interrogates his children about the specific academic subjects they tackled that day. Startled by the sudden initiation of casual small talk, young Eric brightly chimes in to announce that they had been diligently practicing their mathematics. A wave of profound bewilderment washes over the children as their father offers a stiff, highly robotic acknowledgement of their mundane daily studies. Struggling to keep the fragile conversation flowing, he awkwardly attempts to relate to them by confessing his own childhood difficulties with numbers and complex calculations. While Eric bluntly notes the sheer weirdness of this sudden chatter, a remarkably animated Olivia expresses genuine astonishment that her supposedly perfect father possessed any academic weaknesses whatsoever. Pressed eagerly by his curious children for more embarrassing details, the stoic lord averts his gaze and defensively mutters that he actually has plenty of hidden, unglamorous flaws. As Rihanna smiles knowingly, the children mischievously threaten to interrogate their mother for his secrets, prompting him to panic and declare his flaws highly classified information. Observing the chaotic but wonderfully heartwarming banter unfolding before her, the elegant Rihanna graces the table with a soft, genuinely affectionate smile. Bathed in the uncharacteristically warm and lively atmosphere of their family dinner, young Eric beams with absolute, untainted joy. Beaming with pure, unadulterated joy, Olivia smiles warmly as a cheerful imaginary flower sprouts atop her head. Meanwhile, her stoic father finally displays a genuinely soft and tender smile. A full year quickly passes, bringing massive and unexpected news to the entire estate. Joyous celebrations erupt across the bustling town as citizens cheer the safe birth of Lady Rihanna's new baby, marking the first girl born into House Apricot in an entire decade. While a maid practically bursts with excitement over the new little sister, another calmly reminds her to maintain proper decorum. Utterly euphoric at gaining a little sister right after her adorable little brother, Olivia feels as though she has ascended straight to heaven. Suddenly, a chilling realization strikes her, instantly wiping the blissful smile from her face. Panic sets in as her inner flower wilts in confusion, completely baffled because the original game's storyline never featured a little sister for Olivia. Oblivious to her older sister's existential dread, the newborn girl rests peacefully and is officially bestowed the beautiful name Luna. Peering eagerly over the crib, Eric marvels at how perfectly little Luna inherited their mother's strawberry blonde hair and their father's striking red eyes. Despite the terrifying deviation from the game's two-sibling narrative, Olivia solemnly admits to herself that she is genuinely thrilled to have a new baby sister. Gripped by a horrifying new anxiety, she desperately prays that the adorable infant won't meet a tragic end before the game's official Academy storyline even begins. Peeking nervously around the heavy doorway, a newly hired maid hesitatingly calls out to the young mistress. Huddled together in fearful whispers, the new maids gossip about Olivia's notoriously stern and unpleased expression despite the joyous birth. The anxious servants speculate that the eldest daughter is harboring intense jealousy over the attention given to her actual blood sister. Completely misunderstanding the situation, the maids cower in terror at Olivia's intense expression, entirely unaware she is simply agonizing over Luna's dark future. The tense atmosphere shatters violently as a clumsy mistake sends a porcelain tea set crashing to the floor in jagged pieces. Trembling violently before her imposing mistress, the terrified maid bows her head and frantically stammers out a desperate apology. While internally screaming with panic over the maid's safety, Olivia's cursed villainous persona forces her to coldly dismiss the servant for her incompetence. Turning her back on the trembling woman, Olivia bitterly realizes her attempt at a composed, ladylike dismissal has only intensified her terrifying reputation among the new staff. The rumor mill immediately shifts into overdrive as the frightened servants whisper nervously about their mistress's supposedly menacing glares. Judging her harshly, the gossiping maids conclude that Olivia's wicked behavior goes far beyond simple jealousy over her parents' divided attention. Eavesdropping from just outside the partially open door, a dejected Olivia mentally sighs at their harsh words while remaining completely silent. Plagued by immense guilt, she agonizes over whether the mysterious forces of the game are actively twisting her genuine concern for Luna into cold, villainous arrogance. Striding purposefully down the grand corridor, she vows to tread carefully as the world continues to dramatically deviate from her past life's knowledge. Cutting through the idle gossip with icy authority, a stern-faced senior maid suddenly approaches the two whispering servants. The senior maid viciously scolds them for slacking off, demanding they focus on their duties instead of spreading idle rumors. Refusing to let them off the hook easily, she unleashes a relentless barrage of fierce reprimands that leave the young maids completely overwhelmed. Defending her young mistress with fierce loyalty, the veteran servant passionately insists that Olivia's cold exterior merely hides a deeply awkward and gentle heart. Leaving the new maids thoroughly stunned, the faithful veteran storms off, proving that those who truly raised Olivia know her true nature. Lurking menacingly with an unintentional glare, Olivia remains blissfully unaware that her loyal allies are slowly shifting the narrative in her favor. Meanwhile in the nursery, baby Luna reaches out and adorably wraps her tiny fingers around Eric's hand, prompting a shout of pure excitement. Overflowing with brotherly enthusiasm, Eric eagerly invites a hesitant Olivia to step forward and experience the tiny baby's grip. Lying peacefully amidst the soft white sheets, the wide-eyed infant stares curiously up at her older sister. Overwhelmed by a sudden spike of anxiety, Olivia freezes in place and stares nervously at the fragile little life before her. Trembling with self-doubt, she tightly grips the fabric of her floral dress, terrified of somehow harming the delicate infant. Yielding completely to her overwhelming fears, she abruptly rejects Eric's offer and hastily announces her retreat to her own quarters. Slamming the grand nursery doors firmly shut behind her, she leaves a deeply confused Eric standing alone by the crib. Leaning heavily against the closed door, she solemnly vows to keep her dangerous villainous aura far away from the anomalous child until she can guarantee her safety. Reflecting on her hard-fought victories, she takes pride in successfully saving Eric from his dark fate and repairing her parents' fractured marriage. The memory of Eric's bright, unburdened smile flashes through her mind, reinforcing the incredible value of her past interventions. A surge of profound determination washes over her, replacing her anxiety with a renewed, blossoming sense of purpose. Clenching her fists with unwavering resolve, she silently swears to the heavens that she will annihilate any threat to her newly mended family. Later that afternoon, her fierce internal vows of protection are suddenly interrupted by Eric's cheerful observation about the beautiful estate weather. Peering into the baby's rocking crib, Eric suddenly notices that Luna's beloved stuffed animal is nowhere to be found. Before Olivia can even process the minor crisis, the energetic young boy brightly volunteers to retrieve the missing toy and dashes off. Left completely alone in the sprawling nursery, a terrified Olivia nervously begs her brother to return as the suffocating silence presses in. She suddenly flinches in surprise as a soft, disgruntled wail echoes from the wooden crib just inches away from her. Snapping into full protective sister mode, she violently grips the wooden railing and frantically peers down at the baby. Staring down at the wide-awake infant, Olivia breaks into a cold sweat, realizing she is now completely alone with the one person she swore to avoid. Gazing down at the wide-eyed baby, Olivia reflects that she's the type of person who terrifies all the new maids. Sweating nervously, she admits to herself that she can't even make a single expression that would comfort a crying infant. As the baby's lip quivers, Olivia panics, absolutely certain that the child is about to burst into tears. Instead of wailing, the baby erupts into a bright, joyful laugh, completely defying Olivia's grim expectations. Shocked by the sudden giggles, Olivia stares down in utter disbelief and wonders why her little sister is actually laughing. The infant beams with radiant happiness, leaving Olivia baffled since she hasn't even done anything to amuse her. Despite someone playing an enthusiastic game of peekaboo, Olivia remains utterly perplexed, convinced she is supposed to look terrifying. Suddenly, Eric bursts into the room with a cheerful smile, apologizing for keeping his sister waiting. Clutching his stuffed bunny, the young boy freezes in his tracks as he takes in the unexpected scene before him. Relieved that her brother has finally arrived, Olivia listens as Eric marvels at how the recently awakened Luna is actually smiling. Eyes sparkling with awe, Eric praises Olivia's amazing skills, noting that Luna is usually incredibly cranky right after waking up. Taking in his brother's genuine admiration, Olivia quietly absorbs the moment with a thoughtful realization. Leaning over the crib rails, Olivia realizes that Luna shares her brother's odd temperament and silently begs the baby not to cry. Watching the interaction, Eric stands by with a warm, gentle smile lighting up his youthful face. A brief moment of confusion passes between the siblings as they observe the infant's unpredictable mood. Leaning eagerly against the crib, Eric excitedly urges his older sister to take a closer look at the baby. Staring at Luna's rosy little cheeks, he declares that the infant's sweet face seems like a true symbol of happiness. Caught off guard by his profound statement, Olivia softly calls out her brother's name in surprise. Still leaning on the wooden rail, Eric looks up at her with a tender expression and begins to open up about his feelings. He solemnly recalls his past before the manor, explaining how being alone was normal because their hard-working mother left him with no other choice. His sadness shifts to joy as he remembers being welcomed by the family, meeting his sister, and finally gaining the title of Luna's big brother. Holding the giggling baby close, Eric warmly insists that Olivia always makes everyone happier and that Luna's smile is the absolute best proof. Deeply embarrassed by the praise, Olivia crosses her arms defensively, arguing that their mother did all the work and she hasn't done anything truly sisterly. Pausing her defensive rant, Olivia notices Eric affectionately cuddling the baby and silently concedes that his sweet words might not be entirely wrong. A sudden epiphany strikes her as she realizes that using her past life knowledge allowed her to save Eric from darkness and repair her family bonds. Clenching her fists with newfound determination, she concludes that actively rejecting her villainous role will grant her the power to completely change their grim fate. As time passes, the tense atmosphere in the estate softens, and the harsh misunderstandings held by the new servants gradually begin to fade away. The maids watch with knowing smiles, playfully noting that the supposedly intimidating Lady Olivia has returned to visit little Luna yet again. Hovering over the crib with a subtle blush, Olivia devotes every spare moment she has to checking on her adorable younger sister. The household staff whispers their heartfelt admiration, touched by what a wonderful and caring big sister the young lady has truly become. Protected and cherished, Luna grows up perfectly healthy and entirely free of illness, bringing a brilliant new light into the Apricot estate. Surrounded by love and laughter, the dark shadows of the past recede until the once gloomy manor finally feels like a genuine home. Standing together as a united family, Olivia, Eric, their parents, and little Luna pose for a warm, picture-perfect portrait. Overcome with emotional bliss during a garden tea party, Gerald praises the heavens as he remains hopelessly and entirely doting on a snacking Olivia. Enjoying the idyllic afternoon, Eric cheerfully offers his sister some jam, declaring that it pairs perfectly with the delicious scones. As the peaceful outdoor tea continues, the loving siblings happily share their treats and bask in the tranquil garden atmosphere. With a dazzling, enthusiastic smile, the young boy practically sparkles as he loudly proclaims just how tasty the snacks really are. Embracing his protective older brother role to an extreme degree, Eric officially finishes growing into a proud and full-blown sister complex fanatic. Meanwhile, Rihanna struggles with her lingering ailments, still completely unable to see the flowers due to her continuously weak magic. Despite her fragile condition, she maintains a dignified grace and politely guides her young daughter along the manor pathways. Seeing right through the girl's defensive attitude, Rihanna understands the honest feelings behind Olivia's sharp words and treats her with incredibly deep affection. Whenever Olivia sinks into a brooding pout after uttering harsh words, the long-serving staff simply watch her with fond, understanding amusement. The peaceful days shatter when a 10-year-old Olivia receives sudden and incredibly alarming news about an upcoming tea party. Rihanna drops a bombshell, explaining that Her Majesty the Queen is hosting a special gathering specifically to hunt for future attendants and royal fiancés. Sternly ordering her to avoid disgracing the family, her mother commands Olivia to attend the high-stakes royal event together with Eric. Dropping to her knees in pure, unadulterated dread, Olivia groans out loud, realizing that the fateful day of her villainous destiny has finally arrived. Trapped by royal protocol, she furiously curses the fact that she can't skip the Queen's event, a milestone she's tried to avoid ever since her past memories returned. Sitting across the table, her mother watches the dramatic display with a calm, unwavering stare, completely unmoved by her daughter's internal crisis. Breaking the tense silence, Rihanna flashes a sweet, innocent smile that leaves absolutely no room for argument or escape. Sweating profusely under her mother's terrifyingly cheerful gaze, Olivia accepts her inevitable doom and braces herself for the royal tea party. Beaming brightly, the energetic designer praises Olivia as absolutely perfect, leaving the young lady to inwardly groan in despair over her situation. Clasping her hands with a joyful sigh, the designer insists that Olivia's fair skin makes her look good in absolutely anything. Recalling the game's settings, Olivia realizes this fateful tea party is where the Crown Prince chooses his fiancée and her role as the Villainess officially begins. Hoping to avoid her grim destiny, Olivia firmly requests the plainest, least noticeable dress possible so she won't stand out. The designer closes her eyes with a bright, confident smile and cheerfully declares that she completely understands the simple request. Completely ignoring the plea for simplicity, The energetic designer excitedly suggests a full navy skirt scattered with lovely pink ribbons, leaving Olivia staring back in deadpan silence. Olivia bluntly rejects the overly flashy idea, pointing out that a navy dress would stand out too much at her age and begging once again to keep the design simple. Even though the designer verbally agreed to the concept, Olivia strongly suspects her instructions didn't actually get through to the eccentric woman at all. Striking a flashy pose, the incorrigible designer pivots entirely and enthusiastically suggests showering the gown with gemstones instead of ribbons. Having completely reached her limit with the eccentric ideas, an exhausted Olivia simply commands her staff to show the overwhelming guest to the door. Analyzing the situation, Olivia calculates that pastel colors will be popular among her 10-year-old peers, meaning a dark navy dress would definitely end up making her stand out. Striking a dramatic pose in her imagination, she firmly rules out the color red since it was the signature color the original Villainess always wore in the game. Sighing heavily in frustration, Olivia admits she just doesn't feel comfortable leaving her crucial wardrobe choice to that overly trendy designer. She can already envision the eccentric woman ignoring her completely, turning the dress into a flashy, frilly gown on her own while insisting it suits her better. Staring at the massive double doors, Olivia suddenly breaks into a nervous sweat, worrying that her mother might scold her for sending the famous designer away on her own. A booming, furious voice echoes across the entire apricot estate, angrily demanding to know what just happened. With a popping vein on her forehead, her mother fumes with visible anger, calling it an absolute disgrace that a popular designer would force her own tastes on a client instead of listening. Clasping her hands together in a terrifying display of protective fury, her mother immediately reassures a shocked Olivia that they will simply find another designer. Watching her mother's fierce reaction, Olivia realizes with a sweat drop that the matriarch was actually far angrier about the situation than she ever was. Fixing her face into a stern glare, the young lady silently solidifies her resolve to handle this difficult situation perfectly. She fiercely vows to dodge the villainous route and the crown prince's engagement no matter what, absolutely refusing to drag her sweet family into messy drama. As wax-sealed letters scatter across the frame, the narration reveals that they immediately tried to find a new designer but found the task incredibly difficult. Every popular designer was completely booked solid with royal tea party orders, leaving absolutely no room in their schedules to make Olivia a custom dress. Outside a neighboring estate, gossiping voices begin to whisper, asking if others have heard the latest scandalous rumor on top of the booking issues. Vicious rumors spread through the streets claiming that an unbelievably selfish and arrogant Lady Olivia had worked a designer to the bone before firing her. Chatting in the street, one designer shamelessly admits to lying about being booked solid, explicitly warning her friend to turn down any requests from the apricot family. The gossiping women smugly agree that no self-respecting professional wants to get dragged around by some spoiled young lady's ridiculous whims. Back at the manor, a heavy, defeated atmosphere settles over the family as the consequences of the rumors become clear. Clenching her fists in frustration, Olivia wonders if it would be acceptable to simply wear one of her existing dresses since there is no one left to make a new one. Her internal compromise is violently rejected as someone loudly declares that reusing an old dress is absolutely unacceptable for a royal tea party hosted by the Queen. Looking thoroughly exhausted with a drooping flower on her head, Olivia admits she understands her mother's point but genuinely has no idea what to do when everyone claims they are too busy. A dramatic pause lingers over the grand exterior of the apricot estate as a sudden, confident voice breaks the tense silence. Startled, Olivia looks up as her mother suddenly beams with inspiration and confidently declares that she knows just the perfect person to handle the impossible task.